Hey guys, it's Anna from Bright Lane Gardens, and today I wanted to cover a topic that is a frequently asked question here at our native plant nursery in northern Michigan. That question is, what type of native plants can spread easily with minimal intervention and in a relatively short amount of time? So this question has been asked to us so much that we actually went ahead and created our own little section for native plants that spread easily, and this is one of our signs for that section. Typically, the people that are asking this question about plants that spread easily would like to cover a larger area of their yard or property for a relatively low amount of cost. And native plants are an excellent option for this because, of course, they're already conditioned to grow in our area, in our regions, with very minimal human intervention. So if you're looking to cover a meadow, a hillside, or another area of your yard, with just a few plants that'll fill in relatively quickly compared to other varieties, then this is a great video for you. Today we're covering 4 primary plants that all have a variety of growing conditions, so hopefully we'll cover a variety that will suit your property as well. I'll toss in a couple honorable mentions at the end there, and as always, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have on planting native plants. The first plant that I want to talk about today is one that you've most definitely heard of before if you are into native plants at all, and that is going to be our sand Coreopsis, or also known as lance leaf Coreopsis. So that is this colorful plant to my left here. This guy is in a 1-gallon container, and he's at his full mature size, which is typically up to about 2 feet tall. These guys are prolific bloomers. As you can see, it doesn't take much effort for these to really spit out some blooms. Now, lance leaf Coreopsis, sand Coreopsis, most of your Coreopsis plants are going to want full sun. They can tolerate some partial shade. It might reduce the number of blooms that you do see, but in a full sun meadow, these guys will outperform just about anything when it comes to blooms. These are also drought tolerant, which is an added benefit of sticking them out in a larger space that maybe isn't close to a hose and isn't hooked up to any type of irrigation system. So for some of our smaller lance leaf Coreopsis plants, like these guys here, we sell these for about $6 each, which makes it a lot easier for you to go ahead and plant 20 of them in a larger open meadow than it would be to start with a super large plant like this first one that I showed you here. For a plant of this size, these guys spread through self-seeding. So a plant of this size isn't going to spread through your underground rhizomes or any other methods that some other plants use. These guys rely on self-seeding. And in an open meadow setting where you have small mammals, birds, and insects crawling around your plants, this self-seeding is going to really take off. And as you can see, there are so many flowers that each of these is going to produce a seed head once this flower expires. So there are so many seeds and so many opportunities for this plant to grow and start new plants. These guys here are about a year old, maybe even less, so it doesn't take long for these plants to really reach their mature size. These guys will stay a little stunted when put in the ground this year, but will reach their mature size next year and will of course be producing those seed heads. So you'll start to see the spreading as early as year 2 with your lance leaf Coreopsis. Coreopsis is notoriously a keystone species in the native plant world too. It supports hundreds of different varieties of insects, butterflies, moths, you name it. This guy is beneficial for so much wildlife. It also has a really solid root structure and can help prevent some erosion issues in some of your drier regions with sandier soil as well. So if the region that you're looking to plant is a large open meadow space with full sun and very little to no water, the sand Coreopsis is going to be an excellent choice for you to really fill out that area and add some stunning blooms while supporting your local wildlife. Moving on to our next native plant recommendation, we're going to stick right with that full sun drought tolerant vibe, and we're going to head on over to another plant that I highly recommend for filling in areas quickly, and that is yarrow. So this unassuming plant right here is less than a year old. These seeds were started in the spring, and as you can see, he's already sprouted up significant foliage, and this guy here is the very beginning of his first bloom. Yarrow is one of those plants that I warn people about because it spreads so easily. So if you're looking at a really well-groomed, neat looking landscape area, yarrow is probably not for you because he will spread so quickly. These guys spread through underground rhizomes under the soil, and they can spread up to 8 inches per year, which is absolutely insane if you think about that for a plant. So if he starts in a clump this big, he can spread out another 8 inches per year. We're talking about prolific spreading. So if you have a nice, neat landscaped area, yarrow isn't for you. But if you are planting on a hillside, or if you have a nice open meadow with full sun conditions, again, this guy is drought tolerant, just like your Coreopsis is, yarrow is going to be an excellent choice for you. I do have a yarrow cultivar here. As you can see, the bloom is hot pink. Our native yarrow, also known as common yarrow, is going to have a white bloom on it. Still very beautiful, very reminiscent of a Queen Anne's lace, if that's the type of vibe that you're looking for. Queen Anne's lace is actually invasive, so yarrow is an awesome, awesome native alternative for the Queen Anne's lace. This is just an example of a mature size yarrow plant here, and as you can see, about 2 feet tall. Sometimes in ideal conditions, especially after a nice heavy rain, these guys can get a little closer to that 3-foot mark, but typically they like to stay contained right around this 2-foot mark. I really love yarrow because the foliage on it is feathery, lightweight, adds a lot of texture to your area. It's just a really pretty plant even without the flower. Yarrow is a really long bloomer, so typically this guy can bloom from June all the way through September, sometimes even later depending on when that first frost hits. So this is a really, really nice complement to a nice open meadow space. If you're looking for months of bloom time and very little maintenance, yarrow is going to be an excellent choice for you. Another added perk of the yarrow is going to be its drought tolerant. This guy does have really nice deep tap roots, which of course helps anchor our plants and prevent erosion control, but it also allows the plant to dig a lot deeper for moisture than some other traditional ornamental varieties. So if you do have that open meadow area, full sun with no irrigation, your yarrow is going to be an excellent addition. And if you really want a stunning combination, plant your yarrow with that sand Coreopsis. You'll have a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, months of bloom time, and you'll be very surprised at just how quickly that area can spread out and fill in. Now, I know not everybody has a big open meadow with full sun conditions that they're looking to fill in. So my next 2 selections are actually going to be a little more shade friendly, and they can even handle some wet soil. So if you have a shadier area of your property that has maybe some lower regions that tend to collect a lot of moisture during the spring or the fall months, these are going to be some great options for you. Starting with our spiderwort. Now, this is technically an Ohio spiderwort. There are several variations of spiderwort. So if you are in a different region than we are here in northern Michigan, there's likely a spiderwort that is native to your region. So definitely look into that before making your final selection. Most of the spiderworts do look similar. So in appearance, they will all have these delicate purpley blue blooms. And when they're mature, they have so many clusters of these flowers. They're really stunning. This was one of those plants that I was like, wow, that's native to our region. What a beautiful plant. So these guys are a really pretty touch of color. They do bloom in partial shade, even up to somewhat full shade, as long as they're getting just a couple hours of sunlight in there at some point. Typically, they'll still produce some excellent blooms for you. That's pretty rare in the plant world. We all know that plants love to see that sunshine, so it's really great to have a shadier, friendly option that can still give you some really nice color. Spiderworts, for the most part, stay right in that 2.5-foot range. Sometimes in ideal conditions, they can reach up to 3 feet, but really somewhere between 2 to 2.5 feet is the average height. This guy's just about at his average height, but he will fill in. I'll put a video up of a nice cluster here. These guys fill in really nice, and they do spread in clumps for the most part. So spiderwort spreads in 2 primary ways, and that is through stolons, S-T-O-L-O-N-S, which is actually the same way that strawberries spread. So they're not quite rhizomes. They're called stolons, and these guys spread underground. They do tend to spread out in clumps, so you won't really get the runners like you get with the yarrow. It'll stay in a nice clump formation. There is a second way that spiderwort spreads, and this is what causes people to think twice about adding it to certain areas of landscape, and that's through self-seeding. So obviously when you're self-seeding, that means that that seed can land just about anywhere and might pop up in areas that you didn't originally plan on it. But if you're trying to fill in a larger partial shade area of your yard, maybe even with some wetter soil that other plants can't grow on, the self-seeding feature is incredible because that means you get so much more bang for your buck, and this plant can spread out much further than it would be able to through the stolons alone. If you live along a lake shore, if you live along a marshy strip of land, or if you have any lower areas under trees or under other types of foliage in your yard, Spiderwort is going to be a very pleasant addition to your property. My last selection on this list is definitely one of my favorites, and that is my northern bush honeysuckle. So this is our native honeysuckle. There are so many varieties of honeysuckle out there. The majority of them are actually invasive. There's a handful of ornamental species that are non-invasive but non-native. This guy right here is the native variety, and I promise he's so worth it. So this guy blooms yellow to orange flowers, typically from June, July, and August. And as you can imagine, he's a hit with the hummingbirds. So this is one of my favorites to have on the side of our home. This guy does bloom in partial shade, which is again a little more rare for some of our native plant world here. And the foliage is really beautiful. The newer foliage does have a ruddy appearance to it, and it has some really stunning fall colors to offer once we hit those autumn months, typically towards the end of August, early September there. Now, your northern bush honeysuckle is technically a bush, so this is definitely not the mature size. Usually we see these get up to about 3 feet tall and sometimes just as wide. Really good bang for your buck if you're looking to cover a larger area with just a handful of plants. You can really space these 4 to 5 feet apart, and they will grow in within your first season or two. This guy has a really strong rhizomatic root system, high fiber roots, which make it excellent for erosion control, and we commonly recommend this to plant along hillsides or other steep inclines that might be on your property. This guy, especially when planted in a couple groupings, will really add so much color and depth to your space. You'll be impressed with just how much of a difference this singular plant can make. Some other honorable mentions that I would love to suggest for filling in a larger space with fewer plants. Your grasses and your sedges can offer a lot of character without being too busy and overshadowing some of your flowering plants. So bristly sedge is an excellent selection if you have a wet soil area or a lakeshore or the side of a pond. Bristly sedge grows in nice little clumps, stays around 2 feet tall, has some nice fun textures to it, especially during its typical bloom season. And of course, those fibrous roots can really help with erosion control. Big blue stem grass is another one that I love to suggest. I think sometimes customers are a little freaked out by the fact that it can get up to 6 feet tall, but don't be shy. This tall grass adds so much fun texture to your property, and of course it can really fill out into nice large clumps. These make awesome privacy screens if you are looking to do more of a natural privacy screen between your house and a neighbor's house and don't want to invest in some fencing materials. I love using decorative grasses as a privacy screen. One slightly unknown fact when it comes to using decorative grasses as a privacy screen, they have an excellent sound absorption, so they do a way better job than an actual physical fence at really blocking out some of the sound that comes from your neighbor's house too. So just a fun little natural option when it comes to those privacy barriers. And last but certainly not least, don't be afraid to choose shrubs over herbaceous plants. So herbaceous plants meaning the plant will actually die all the way back to the soil every winter and will regrow from the bottom up. Typically we define shrubs as having woody growth or more permanent growth that will stay above the soil during the winter season and will sprout new growth from the growth above the soil. I love to recommend 9-bark and shrubby cinquefoil as two really common full sun options for some of those shrubs. Silky dogwood is a great partial sun option that does feature these really cute, delicate little blooms in the spring. And last but certainly not least, speckled alder is a really great tree option. It can get up to 25 feet tall. This guy is really, really common for us to recommend for your lakeshore areas, erosion control, marshy areas. He can drink a lot of water and he can actually really help dry up some of those areas too. A lot of times planting a tree or a shrub in lieu of 6 to 7 herbaceous plants can cover a much larger area and will end up actually being less expensive for you in the long run because you only have to buy 1 or 2 shrubs compared to 7 to 8 herbaceous plants. These are just some tips and tricks that we use when we're working with a client that wants to fill out a larger space but maybe doesn't quite have the budget to do so. We love to get creative with our landscape clients and really coach them through what varieties of plants will work well in their space. Of course, one of the primary goals when we're purchasing native plants is that we want a low maintenance garden. We don't want to be out there tending to the garden every day. So it's really important that we match up the attributes of your space with the features of that plant. For example, we want to make sure that we know your soil moisture levels, if you have irrigation or not, what your soil type is, how much sunlight it gets, and what's your biggest critter problem, aka deer resistance. Then we match that up to the attributes of the native plants that we're selling to make sure that we're matching those up as accurately as possible so that you're left with a beautiful, low maintenance, healthy garden. We have so many more native plant videos coming up, including drought tolerant, wet soil tolerant, shade tolerant options. So please subscribe to our channel, set up your alerts so that you know when the next video launches. And as always, if you have any questions for me on native plants in your yard, leave them in the comment section below. We always appreciate the time you spend on our channel. It seriously helps out small businesses like ours so much. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today, and I sure hope to catch you next time. Bye-bye.